today it was up in the 60s. So
Ah, yeah,
Good
that ain't cold.
afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Music and Technology Seminar at Carnegie Mellon. Our guest today is Roger Dannenberg. Roger received a PhD in computer science from Carnegie Mellon University. He is internationally known for his research in the field of computer music. Roger has done so many things related to CS and music that it's hard to know what to say as an introduction. But here's a thought for you. I've been following and learning about Roger's projects for years and years and years, from Audacity to the one he will be presenting today. I think I can put Roger's projects into two general categories, all coming out of the acrobatics Roger has done with anything computer science inventive related. One category I would say is having fun, like the doorbell of his front door that, when pushed, plays a random melody from among the many he has stored in some kind of digital library. A second category I would characterize as helping out, where he sees a situation that can be hugely improved, a solution to a problem often related to music. This is the case in today's presentation, how to ease the process of rehearsing a complicated piece of music. Please welcome Roger Dannenberg to the Music and Technology Seminar.
all right, thanks everyone, and it's great to be here. I'm going to jump right into sharing some slides, and we'll get started. So that should be good. All right, so my title is Computer Accompaniment in the Production of Felicità. This is computer accompaniment is something I've been working on for a long time, actually publishing our first work in a conference in 1984. So we're beyond 40 years at this point and still learning some new tricks and some new things. So today I want to talk about what is computer accompaniment, what are some technical challenges, and then I will talk about this production we did, Felicità, going as transitioning from a non-accompaniment performance using live electronics into a system using our new computer accompaniment software. And I'll share some experience and share some video from the performance, and we'll wrap it up. So what is computer accompaniment? The idea, and again, this stemmed from work that actually started in 1983. At that time, a lot of most live performances with computer music were done by actually recording computer music pieces on tape because computers were not fast enough to do anything in real time. Digital synthesizers didn't really exist before 1983, and so that was just the way composers worked. And I always thought that was a very kind of stiff, awkward way to perform. I mean, you have a live human performer capable of expressive music making, and you force them to wear headphones and listen to a click track or memorize the tape, and the the timing is completely frozen in the fixed media of the tape, which we used then. It soon became CDs and multi-track digital tapes, and then just audio files as the technology changed. And so my idea as a musician, and but also having a few computer science tricks up my sleeve, was to think, when we get the capability of actually generating sound in real time, which was beginning to happen I mean, it had already happened with analog control, and would soon be there and very available in the 80s with digital synthesizers. My thought was maybe we could get the computer to listen to a live performer, follow along in a score, and then synchronize accompaniment parts to that, and that would leave things flexible, at least in terms of timing, for expressive musicianship, and still enable computer sounds and computer technical capabilities and electronic orchestration and all those good things you get with computer music. And so this is the kind of the system diagram for all of that. You have a live performance as input, and the first stage is to follow the score. So we need to match the live performance to a stored machine-readable score. And this is tricky because in any real performance, there are always going to be mistakes, either by the human or sensor and noise problems in sensing what the human is doing. And so there's never going to be a perfect match to the solo score. At least we can't count on it. So we have to be very robust and tolerant in matching. And that was one of the key pieces of technology in the early days to make this stuff work. Once you could follow the score, then the musical problem becomes knowing locations in the score and knowing the timing. How do you control a performance to get a musical output? You certainly don't want to just instantaneously advance to the next score position every time it changes. You don't want to necessarily abruptly change tempo or abruptly go very fast or abruptly stop just because you have new information from the score follower. And so making all of this stuff musical and synchronized is a balancing act and a musical problem. But in any case, we get a performance out of that and use it to control a music synthesizer, of any kind, and we get sound out in real time that's synchronized with the human. So I want to play, because I always play this when I give talks on computer accompaniment. I think it's a pretty amazing for the time. This is software that was written in 1985, intended to be a commercial product. So it was kind of a quick transition from the research lab to something commercial. And this is running on an 8 megahertz 16-bit computer called the Amiga, and you'll hear it. This is a demonstration of a computer accompaniment system. I'm going to begin by loading a file into the program. The file contains a score, and in the score there's a part that I'm going to play on trumpet. That's also displayed on the screen. There's another part which is an accompaniment part, in this case composed quite some time ago. The purpose of the program then is to listen to my performance, a live performance of the solo part, and to synchronize the other parts and play them along with me. Okay, I'm going to stop it there and jump forward to another section where I intentionally make mistakes so that you can see what the program is really capable of. Okay, so you heard,
This is a
you heard plenty of mistakes and tempo changes, and hopefully you got the point that the computer was following all of that and staying synchronized. So the technical challenges in doing this are, first of all, real-time score matching. We need to tolerate missing notes, wrong notes, extra notes. The timing is imperfect at best, and when you're dealing with chords, which we'll talk about with keyboard input, chord notes are not actually simultaneous or well ordered, and that adds some interesting problems. You can also have trills and ornaments, and their performance is indeterminate. More or fewer trill notes, faster and slower trills, ornaments may be performed differently or optionally. And a big problem is that you need to respond quickly. You're not really allowed to wait and see what happens or look ahead into the performance, because this is all happening live in real time. On the performance side, the computer performer must take the output from the score follower and predict the tempo and the location. We need to predict tempo because not every accompaniment note is going to be simultaneous with the performance. The accompaniment might be playing 16th notes and the performance is only playing half notes. So you have to interpolate a lot of notes in between. And so that requires prediction and tempo estimation. Also, you want the response to be musical. So as I said, having just responding instantaneously to everything, which computers are sort of capable of, it may not result in a musical output. And so some musicianship has to be built in somehow. So let's talk about some solutions. And I'm going to give a kind of an overview of how these systems work, and there are multiple algorithms and lots of details that I'm going to be sort of skipping over. But hopefully this will give you an idea without getting too technical. So first of all, let's take a very naive approach to sequence matching. So we think of the live input as being a sequence of events, normally notes with pitches. And we have a sequence of pitches, and we're trying to match that to a sequence of pitches that comes from the score. So a naive way to do it, and this is so impractical, there's no way that you could actually do this, but just as a thought experiment, imagine that you construct reduced scores by deleting some notes from the scores. So you take the score with all of the notes, you take every combination where you delete one, and then you take every combination where you delete, all combinations of two and all combinations of three. So you end up with an astronomical number of scores of all kinds, all variations with, every note either present or not present. And then let's do that same thing with the performance. So we generate from the actual performance, we drop, one note, two notes, three notes, four notes, every combination. And then suppose we compare every one of these reduced scores to every one of these reduced performances. And we're looking for a pair that match perfectly and that have the most possible matches. And you can hopefully imagine that could be actually the best solution. That's what you're looking for, because if it's the longest pair of matches, that means you've ignored the minimal number of notes in the score or the performance. And so when you ignore a note from the score, it's basically corresponds to a note that was missing in the performance. And if you ignore a note played in the performance, that's equivalent to an extra note that wasn't in the score. And so you're looking for kind of the maximal number of actual matches between the score and the performance. Now, this diagram at the bottom illustrates that. So here's, let's say, the score at the top, and we've eliminated the C and the A out of the sequence, and we find that's a perfect match to the performance at the bottom if we eliminate the F. And this is the longest possible pair that you can get with these inputs. And the problem with this is, if you're also reading the notes carefully, there are 2 to the n power reduced scores given n notes, and there are 2 to the m reduced performances. So, even if the score has 20 notes, we're talking about, 2 to the 20th is what is 1,000,000, and if we're computing all million of those and all million of the performances and doing the comparisons, that's like 1,000,000 operations. And we want to do that for every note of the performance. So that seems like completely impossible, even though it might be a really nice result. And the amazing thing is that there's a class of programs known to computer scientists as dynamic programming algorithms. And, as the slide says, dynamic programming to the rescue. You can actually solve this, computationally infeasible problem exactly with far fewer operations. In fact, you can solve this problem with only n operations, not 2 to the n, but only n operations for each input note. And it's incremental. So every time you add a note, you only need n more, or something, proportional to n computer instructions to update your solution. And if you assume you know where the performer is playing, say within 20 or 30 notes, or pick a number, you can reduce the computation further to just a constant time. And it's a small constant. So, on modern computers, you can do all of this with just microseconds per input note. And you might say, well, how is this? I can't imagine how that's possible. Well, the trick is that for every new input note, the best possible match that you can get to the score can be computed in terms of the sequence of inputs that's one shorter. So basically, we are doing some bookkeeping and kind of ignoring all of those millions and billions of combinations up to the current point in time, and we're through dynamic programming, we're able to do a very simple calculation to incrementally update it at each step. So I know that's a very hand-waving, intuitive explanation, but we could spend a whole lecture or two talking about dynamic programming and how it works. And I'll confess that even for me, it took me a long time to get my head around this and figure out how to apply this to computer accompaniment. But hopefully that gives you, some sense of what's going on. And there's another approach that other people have taken more recently, based on the idea, a model that also comes from computer science and statistics called hidden Markov models, or HMMs. HMMs use a probabilistic model to compute the most likely state, where in this case we consider score positions to be states, and so it's kind of a state transition model, and we're looking for the sequence of states that's most likely given a sequence of performance inputs, which are, in HMM terminology, those are called observations. There's been a lot of kind of implicit assumption in the literature, I think, that HMM is a better approach because it has a probabilistic basis, and also, I think, largely because HMMs have been incredibly powerful in speech recognition research, which is a lot bigger than computer music research. However, HMMs, which, by the way, also rely on dynamic programming, usually going by the alternate name, or more specific name, Viterbi. But HMMs have not actually been compared in a real objective study to the sequence matching methods that I introduced. And so, in fact, right now I'm working with a few students on annotating some data and building a careful comparison with some state-of-the-art HMM algorithms, along with a state-of-the-art sequence matching algorithm that I've been working on. So maybe soon we'll know which is actually better, but I'm betting on the sequence matching for a number of technical reasons that have to do with how well you can actually model the music problem. But I'll leave it at that, and let's move on from score matching and score following to performance synchronization and control. So this is generally, I think, not as deep or technical or difficult as score following. I've, from the beginning, relied on rule-based methods. The advantage of rule-based methods is they can be very robust and understood. You sort of know what the program's going to do, and you can reason about it. If things don't go the way you like, you can generally figure out what happened and possibly add more rules and special cases. So it becomes sort of a expert system approach. And so the way we do the performance control and synchronization is, first of all, estimate the position and tempo using linear regression. So we just, we have a history of time and score location, and you can imagine just plot those on a graph and fit a line to it. That's basically what linear regression does, and that gives us a position and tempo to follow in the future until we get more information. And then when there are discontinuities, we simply speed up or slow down over some reasonable time interval. And it kind of depends on the music. If the music has very steady tempo and you want the accompaniment to be very steady, then you can do a lot of smoothing. If you want the system to be very expressive and responsive and the performer is not going to be following a very steady tempo, then you can change the smoothing so that you speed up or slow down much more quickly. And then the third idea here is that if you're doing smoothing, but there's actually a big discontinuity, maybe the performer skips a bunch of notes or stops for a while and then restarts. You could, the accompaniment could be quite far off of the performer, and you want to bring them into synchronization. So at some point, if things are really bad, like more than a second or so, then you might want to actually just stop the accompaniment and restart it in synchrony with the new estimate of where the performer is. Humans do this too. If you're a piano accompanist and suddenly you're just on the wrong measure, you're likely to kind of look at the score and hear it and find your place on the score and just start playing. You're not going to try to speed up or slow down. And this adaptation is illustrated down here below. Imagine that we have this score position. Can I draw? Whoops. Let me try this. Yeah, okay, so we have this score position over here on the left, and the performer plays a new note. Let's see, we're at this time. Performer plays a new note, and the new linear regression says, "Hey, you're at this score position. You're earlier, so you're too early." The performance is early. The accompaniment is a beat ahead or something. And so what do you do about it? Well, you have this new regression line down here, and so we slow down, illustrated by the dotted lines, to transition over some reasonable interval like this, maybe a couple of beats, maybe more, and sort of smoothly keep the accompaniment going, but you transition from one tempo curve to another one. And that's about all there is to it. There's not a whole lot you can do, although researchers have tried anyway, and applying methods from graphical models and machine learning. And the basic idea is you can treat tempo as a variable that depends upon lots of things, musical features like harmony and tension and rhythm, and of course it also depends on the real-time performance input. And so you can attempt to learn from data how to update tempo and position, and it can be effective. In fact, one of my students, former students, Gus Jha, showed that with very expressive piano performance, he could eliminate about 50% of the synchronization error by doing this modeling. But it did require multiple performances and rehearsal and a lot of work, and it's not necessarily all that robust. Another person who's done work in this area is Chris Raphael, and Chris told me that his stuff works well because he's a professional oboist and he plays consistently from one performance to another. But if you play things really outside of the data distribution that you've been rehearsing with, things can go a little crazy. And so there are a lot of questions about this and making it robust, and so I've more or less ignored these attempts to learn to guess tempo changes and instead just do linear regression. So I have a demonstration of the software I've been working with, Accomplice. I'm going to show you this, and then we'll talk about applying Accomplice to a real serious performance of an opera that happened in November. So let's see if I can make this run. I want to introduce Accomplice, a polyphonic MIDI input computer accompanist. Accomplice synchronizes accompaniment to a live keyboard performance. Where does the accompaniment come from? You load a standard MIDI file into the program with the keyboard part on one channel and the accompaniment on other channels. Accomplice can listen to you and adjust the tempo and position of the other parts, which you can send to any synthesizer. For more experimental music, you can send O2 or Open Sound Control messages to another program such as SoundCool, PD, Max, or Live. So let's get started with a simple example. I have Bach's Minuet in G already set up so that I can play the right-hand part and Accomplice will play the left. To select the piece, I go to the project window and select from a drop-down list. This is the conductor program, which coordinates with one or more player programs. In the player, we're going to mute the right-hand track so that it only plays the left hand. Back on the conductor, we have some cues set up. Metro means that we'll get a count off, but there are other options. Okay, let's go. Notice that I can speed up or slow down. And Accomplice also ignores mistakes, at least up to a point. To fine-tune performances, the Accomplice MIDI player allows you to make notes more or less legato. You can shift the attack times to get a better groove. You can shift velocities to tweak different voices. And even map channels or tracks to different instruments without going back to a MIDI sequencer or music notation editor. I think you get the idea. Imagine playing with a whole MIDI orchestra. We can do a lot more than play conventional MIDI instruments. This is a little patch I created with SoundCool to play some sound files. For example, here's the first one. And here's the fourth one. These can also be triggered using Open Sound Control, and here you see the port number is 8001. So for Accomplice, I wrote a little piano piece in Finale, saved the MIDI file, and I created a second file in Allegro, which is a text-based music notation. Here's the score, which says, first of all, that the tempo is 131.953, which is actually the precise tempo that Finale put into the piano score MIDI file. And this piece is in 4/4 time. On track 2, I have some OSC messages. The first one says, at the time of 4 whole notes, which is measure 5, send the OSC message to address /4/push1 with an integer parameter of 1. This should be displayed graphically as a note with pitch C6 and quarter note duration with the string SND1 next to it. All the other messages follow the same format, so this score is going to cue some sounds in time with my performance. Back at the conductor, I can select this project. Accomplice loads the configuration information and scores from a directory, and we're ready to play. So let's hear it. Listen for the electronic sounds that come in automatically. surface of what Accomplice can do. You can set up cues so that Accomplice will take the lead and set the tempo. You can control audio processors such as delays and pitch shifters to modify the live keyboard performance. You can connect to an acoustic piano that has MIDI output, and you can even synchronize video playback. Accomplice is open source, free, and running on Mac OS. It will also be released for Windows and Linux, and I hope you can use it to create some interesting music. Please let me know. I want to introduce... Okay, so, somewhere in that video it says, imagine performing with a whole MIDI orchestra. Well, that's exactly what we wanted to do, and this opera, Felicità, gave us an opportunity to do that. The project was not created for a computer accompaniment. It was a real musical project that began back in 2020 with my collaborator Jorge Sastre, and we planned the first performance for vibraphone and other percussion instruments, along with electronics, using this system SoundCool that you just saw. SoundCool is mainly a kind of high-level control system that's intended to be manually, interactively controlled with touchscreens, and we did that. But in the opera, I wanted to not only use electronics, but have it sort of rhythmically synchronized with the performance, and particularly in the parts of the opera that I wrote. I tried really hard to do that and had these cued rhythmic sequences frozen into audio, but we could cue them live. And my thinking was that if the performers were consistent with tempo and we cued things in at the right time, that everything would just lock in and it would be possible. But in practice, it was really hard to coordinate. The performers often had difficulty hearing the cues clearly, and it's rehearsal time is limited enough if you have to, go adjusting monitors and redo things carefully just so they can hear the electronics. It just became impossible to pull it off, and we made a lot of compromise. We simplified the score. I rewrote some of the electronics to use texture where the rhythm was less apparent, so if things were not synchronized, it wouldn't matter so much. And we pulled off the premiere, and I'll show you. I'll play some of what it sounded like in the first performance. But after that, a concert pianist became very interested in the opera and wanted to perform it with us. And I thought, well, if we have piano instead of vibraphones, we could use MIDI, and we could use maybe we could use Accomplice and have a much more elaborate electronics. So I lobbied pretty hard for computer accompaniment. Jorge thought I was crazy to do something so untested and risky, but I convinced him that it would be okay, and we did it. So let's go back to the first real performance of Felicità after some workshops that don't count, and this was with one percussionist who mostly played vibraphones, and we had electronics from being cued by SoundCool, and a couple of singers. I guess there's only one in this example, but I'll play some of how that went. And actually, in this excerpt, there are some chord changes. I like this section, so maybe it's not showing an example where we really compromised a lot, because we did get some chord changes in the electronics, and they're reasonably well synchronized with the live performers. But here it is. So if you listen to this a few times and had the score, you probably hear where the poor vibraphonist was struggling to find a happy medium between the fixed electronics score and the soprano, because she was pulling in one direction and the electronics was pulling in the other direction. So that's the kind of thing we wanted to eliminate. And so this is, yeah, wait a minute. Oh yeah, okay. We'll do this. So, no, that's just, okay, sorry, I'm getting confused with my slides. So let's, so when we started thinking about Accomplice, that enabled a lot more MIDI orchestration and synchronization with the live performance. And we ended up using the same percussionist with kind of a reduced part and some changes. We added a piano, and we also added a VL, which is a medieval string instrument you'll hear. And we could add lots of MIDI electronics through Accompaniment. And I did the electronic orchestration using Logic Pro with 9 tracks of MIDI instruments. And I'll play just, this is some kind of pure audio being played by Logic Pro. And then I have another little excerpt here. I think this one has some of like a not a human voice, but a synthesized voice track, just for reference. I guess I was wrong about that. But it did have some vibraphones that were simulated. So the way this orchestration went is we took simulated voice, synthesized VL, and synthesized vibraphone, and mixed in all the electronics, and we could essentially sequence all of this in Logic Pro as sort of a to give a rough idea of what everything was going to sound like when it was done live. And then, of course, for the performance, we strip out the any simulated voices or piano or vibraphone, and use only the MIDI orchestration parts. And then the timing was all, the actual performance was by Accomplice and not by the Logic Pro sequencer, so that everything could be synchronized. And in addition to this, we did live processing, and we had some pre-recorded audio that we cued with SoundCool. So there was a lot of stuff going on, and and so I want to play from the performance just in November. Again, this is with live pianist. MIDI is connected to Accomplice, and I have a couple of excerpts. Again, I'll play that same passage. And as I listen to these excerpts, I'm beginning to appreciate how well this actually worked. This was much more synchronized, and I think the whole performance was slower because the musicians and the conductor were going with the feeling of the soprano, so she was no longer forced into some imagined tempo that got wired into the soundtrack somewhere. Accomplice was able to follow and play this opera throughout. It's about a half hour long, so it was a lot of music, and it was reliable. It did not get lost. We used many cues to restart the score because there were scene changes, some long pauses and fermatas and other things going on. So this was not a completely automated from beginning to end, but sections where score following was important. It was automated. So to do that, we used a built-in cue editor so that we could basically break the score up into cues that were manually triggered during the performance to start things off, just the way a conductor would give a cue to the live performers. Let's see. I would say the main problem that we had was fermatas, in other words, pauses in the music, especially the short ones were required that, well, we thought we could get away with just putting the pause into the score, but there was enough variability that if the score pause was too short, the score would come in early, and that was not good. If the pause in the score was too long and the live performers came in early, then the computer would be scrambling to catch up and adjust the tempo, and that didn't work so well either. So we ended up adding a lot of cues, every time there was a fermata, but that required some manual interaction, and it was just a little bit nerve-wracking to try to, synchronize everything carefully by hand. We also captured some piano performance data from this real performance so we could do further study and analysis. So to wrap up, Accomplice worked well, and it enabled synchronization that was musically important for the opera. The feedback from the performers and the audience, the video watchers that we've had so far has been very positive about the fullness of the orchestration in this chamber music setting that we were able to achieve, largely because Accomplice was there adding a lot of instrumentation. And one comment I can say about the pianist was very initially almost traumatized at the idea of having to play and have this machine listen to her and try to synchronize, and she was just scared. But after she got used to it, she really enjoyed it, thought it was a lot of fun, and she referred to Accomplice. I was hoping she would come to think of Accomplice as just another player, with very professional performance capabilities. And in the end, she referred to it as her baby. She didn't think of it as a live musician at all. She thought of it as like a beginning baby student who, was always looking to the adult or the teacher and following and mimicking everything they did in imitation, because that's what Accomplice was designed to do. And so, I think it was funny to me to hear, what a professional performer, how a professional performer would think of this strange black box that's playing along with them. Recently, in trying to do evaluations, I've come up with a new algorithm and some new techniques for dealing with trills and grace notes and more, that I hope will make Accomplice even more versatile and robust in the future. So we'll see how that work goes. And I'd be happy to take any questions people might have.
Yeah, Roger, that's pretty remarkable.
Thank
Just
you.
a few days ago, a former student who graduated around 10 years ago, he's a composer and he writes, Broadway musicals and stuff like that. And he told me that a lot of the musicals, at least things that he's been working on, are computer generated. It seems that there's a click track, so it's not, there's not a little bit of interaction between the performer and the click track. We just have to stay on the beat. But one thing he told me was that the computer, or whatever they're using to organize the whole thing, can also, how to put this, cover for a singer who can't sing all the high notes. And the computer will play back, I guess, a pre-recorded section where the singer apparently is just making the mouth motions and really getting into it, but he's not really singing.
Yeah, interesting. This whole lip sync thing has been going on for decades, and there was a big scandal. It was performer Nilly Vanilli was kind of famous for this, and for a while it was kind of a meme referring to the Nilly Vanilli problem. But now it's so common that groups come out and lip sync, that a lot of pop and rock performances, I think, have become more like ballet. Or modern dance. They come out and do dance numbers, and these singers cannot possibly be doing this athletic dancing and singing with perfect pitch and all the perfection that it sounds like they have. So there's a lot of pre-recorded stuff going on. I remember what was Chicago, the band Chicago, the brass, when they started playing stadiums, the brass players just got sick of it because they couldn't hear themselves. It was a horrible place to play, and so they were doing a lot of pre-recorded brass tracks, and they would just go out and pretend and rake in the money. So, another thing that's happening in Broadway that started 20 years ago or more, the company called Music Arts Technologies or something like that, MAT, introduced a system with multiple keyboards and some very complicated mapping that would kind of divide the keyboard into different sections, and depending on which octave you were playing in, your MIDI notes would get routed to different synthesizer voices. So you could be playing, brass and strings at the same time, and they did a lot of support a lot of kind of reduced orchestra musicals with two keyboardists, so that gives them like four different instrument groups. And then there'd be maybe a live drummer and a live first violin and a live first trumpet player and a few other live players. But that's a lot of touring musicals that just couldn't afford to tour with a full orchestra were using this music arts technologies system. And other writers like what was the opera with the roller skates? Midnight Express, or something like that. I think that was Andrew Lloyd Webber actually wrote for that technology because he wanted to add these synthesizer sounds to the traditional pit orchestra. So anyway,
One odd thing that this person told me was that when they add the singer's voice, when he's just mouthing the words and, to fill in his high notes that he can't sing, that it wasn't really his voice that they were putting in there, it was somebody else's.
oh wow.
And he told me that no one seemed to notice, and I found that hard to believe.
Yeah, well, another thing that's been happening with musicals, I mean, for a long time, is the amount of sound design and sound amplification with a microphone on everyone and everything being routed through speakers. To me, these musicals don't even sound like live performance at all. Like, what's the point of having live musicians if the sound that you're hearing is coming out of speakers? And so you're not getting a three-dimensional spatial sound of an orchestra even in a pit. You're just getting sound coming out everywhere out of speakers, and I find that very frustrating. Like, just even though I do all this electronic stuff, we have singers on stage and percussion on stage, and it's a very three-dimensional spatial live sound that we're getting that I don't really get from a lot of modern musicals.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Do you have a question?
I do have a question, although I think Professor Stern does as well, and I think he might have beat me to it. So
Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment. I'm sure you're aware of this, but a big thing that's going on right now is the negotiations between the union, the musicians union, and Broadway producers in terms of how many musicians are in the pit. And in 2004, I was at the meeting of the Acoustical Society, which was in New York City that fall, and there was a demonstration of the so-called virtual orchestra, which was one of these technologies which I'm sure you're aware of. It was a really cool demo. The whole thing was at City Center, where the Battle Line Opera frequently performed. It was very well attended. I mean, it was heavily hyped in the ASA meeting, and they had first they started behind the curtain with a single singer on stage, and the person was singing, and there was a conductor and the machine. Then the orchestra behind them would, slow down and speed up, just as in standard Dannenberg demos. And then they pulled back the curtain. And what the system was that it was a single person touching a keyboard, basically following the rhythm and just playing a single note, as far as I could tell. It's got to be one of the most boring jobs in music. But it was certainly very, very effective. wanted to ask the presenter, what he thought the steady state was likely to be in the absence of legal intervention or union negotiations between live music and, computer generated music, but I never got to hear the answer because they closed the session. I certainly told them that I was going to say, as a member of the Acoustical Society of America, I was very impressed by the demo. As a member of the American Federation of Musicians, I was very alarmed by the demo. But in any case, I never found that out. But I'm sure you're aware of this, very overlapping technologies with different application.
Yeah, yeah, and the use of another way to do some kind of computer accompaniment is through conducting, and probably tapping interfaces are the most reliable. That's sort of a special case for Accomplice. I haven't even done it, but with other systems I have, and pretty easy to do. And so yeah, that's been that was pretty controversial. I'm a union member too, and I have mixed feelings about it. My main feeling about all this is that the recording industry has done such a good job of wiping out live music and making it unprofitable that what we do as technologists with computers is just in the noise. So let's just try to be creative and do interesting stuff.
Ruben, go ahead.
My question was sort of related to that was twofold, sort of. First, how do you want to see this technology, or how are you going to keep developing this technology? I mean, I know that you've been sort of developing it for your entire career, but what do you see next? And also, my second question is, how do you see this technology being used sort of in conjunction with performers and musicians? Because I know that a lot of people might sort of see this as like a replacement for live music, where I don't think that's sort of the intention.
Yeah, so a couple of things. In spite of the fact that this technology has been around for 40 years and pretty usable, it's very uncommon to hear a concert or a performance using computer accompaniment. And so one thing that I hope to do is make Accomplice more available, more widely known, and more usable to especially for experimental computer music performances. I think that's where it could be, could find a place, and so I would like to see that. The other thing is, for a lot of, I used to think, wow, this is like the solution to everything for live performance with computers. And then I realized, for music with a steady beat, so that's a lot of music. That's popular music, rock, church music, folk music, jazz. When the beat is very steady, then these techniques of following expressive timing are not really that good. For one thing, that you don't have a particular instrument like a piano that's playing all the time. In rock and jazz and lots of these things, the pianist may not even consistently play a score. They may play from a lead sheet and improvise the chord voicings or even rhythms. And so in those situations, this technology doesn't really apply. And for a while, for a few years, I worked on different approaches to support kind of popular music or steady beat music accompaniment. And Ricardo was involved in a CMU jazz band performance where we built a very elaborate system, and did I think a beautiful performance. But that technology is sort of not taken off, and I guess I sort of dropped it because I didn't see I felt like I needed to generate some interest in, people interested in actually mounting performances using these technologies to make it worthwhile. But we wrote some papers, developed some technologies, did some demos, and there it is. But it's sort of another thing that's just out there as a possibility that people are not using.
For sure. And like one thing that I am sort of thinking of this application in my life is that in like I think in a lot of sort of amateur this is very specific, but a lot of amateur musical productions like uses that weird like auto player, but it just like creates so much hassle for everyone to try to like match that technology to performance. And I think like it could have really good applications in rehearsal for like, okay, we're rehearsing for a live performance, but until then we need this track to be able to just follow us as we make creative decisions. I think that that would save so much time and so much energy for, I know, a million different stage managers who are currently being driven insane by these terrible score following technologies.
Yeah. I think there's a trade-off between what you can gain by having a simulated orchestra, providing accompaniment versus the setup time of connecting a live pianist that's going to follow things, and I mean the computer's going to follow the pianist, and maybe the pianist is going to follow the singers or the conductor or whatever. So they have to be, set up and connected, and then you've got to have a sound system and worry about balance. So, it's non-trivial, and so maybe that's something I've thought a lot about. Is Ricardo's going to hate me for this, but how do you replace a sound engineer along with all this other stuff? You can replace the musicians, but if you're doing it with electronics, currently you've got to do some very careful sound engineering and setup. And so can we build computer systems that are actually listening for balance and doing adjustments and EQ and everything else you have to do to make things actually sound good?
Well, that's okay, because maybe that is the future of the sound engineer.
It may be. It may be.
Here's one for you, Roger. So you have a conductor and you have a sound engineer who's running the computer. And the tempo and all of those things that you're trying to synchronize are done by the hands and the arms of the conductor.
Okay, so that is there has been a fair amount of research on conducting systems, and my feeling about that is it's largely based on a sort of false premise that what conductors do is control tempo. They certainly in rehearsal decide what the tempo is going to be, and they certainly influence tempo, but especially orchestra conductors don't really give the clear textbook beat patterns. They don't consistently, wave their hands either on the beat or at some fixed phase offset from where the beat is. Conductors kind of famously anticipate the beat for various reasons, and orchestras sort of intuitively figure out what they mean. So there are a lot of real technical problems trying to follow a conductor, and I love what Kevin No, who has conducted the Pittsburgh New Music Ensemble, in some interviews that we did, when he reviewed videos of his performance, and we asked him, so, okay, what were you doing at every moment of this performance? And he said, to a large extent, what he was doing was trying to remind players of what they did in rehearsal. So he wasn't actually trying to change the live performance or control the live performance. He was doing something completely different. He was referencing something that happened the day before. And so how would you ever get a computer, to roll in and just, follow a conductor if that's what's really going on in conducting?
Yes, but then maybe the training for conductors has to change.
Well, yeah, exact. And I was about to say that, but I felt like I was talking too much. But you're exactly right. Like conductors can adapt if the technology is that that the system is going to pick up the beat from the conductor, then conductors can learn to conduct, exactly on the beat and control the beat that way. And that is possible, and systems have been built that do that. Whether that's a great idea or not, I don't know.
That's not clear, but I think some people in the orchestra might appreciate that.
As a trumpet player, so I'll tell you, when I first started working on computer accompaniment, I was actually inspired by someone who was building an ultrasonic sensor for sensing conductor, waving their hand and conducting. And I took one look at that, and as a person who's played trumpet in an orchestra, I just thought immediately that is never going to work. Because I've tried, when I first started playing with an orchestra, I naively followed the conductor, and boy, I was so embarrassed, because you just can't do that. It's not what's going on. And so that's what inspired me to think about, okay, so how did I end up, how do I end up playing in the orchestra? And it's mostly by listening to the other players. And then I started thinking, oh, if I'm listening to other players, maybe a computer could do that, and that would require the computer to, understand where the players were by matching sequences of pitches. And I think maybe I could do that. So that's kind of the whole development of computer accompaniment was inspired by the impossibility of just directly following a conductor and getting musical results.
Yeah. Some people in orchestras have told me that they don't even look at the conductor, but instead they look at the first violin.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some great stories from brass players who sit in the back of the orchestra and they have to do everything. I don't know. I think we just think very differently from string players who have to probably do a lot more anticipation and gestures to get sound out of their instruments. And the famous quote, I forgot who the conductor was and who the trumpet player was, but they were both well-known players in the principal trumpet player in the back, when they saw this conductor come in and what he was doing, he said to his fellow trumpet section and brass players, "Heads down, gentlemen." Like, don't you dare look at the conductor. We're going to do this our way.
Okay, are there any other questions? Patrick.
Hi, Professor Dannenberg. I actually wanted to ask about some more use scenarios of computer accompaniment, because I think in your presentation most of the things we looked at were either MIDI input or instruments with definite pitches. So I was wondering if let's say Accomplice has been used for, let's say, the voice, which there is more pitch slides, melisma, all that. So maybe I'm assuming that when there is acoustic instruments, it's using an transducer to turn it into MIDI signal for the computer. So in the case where let's say you have voice as the input, as the soloist, then how would the computer accompaniment respond?
Yeah, good question. So that's, the current system I'm only really pushing it for piano or keyboard accompaniment, because I think that's the situation where the system is going to be robust and reliable, and it's the kind of thing that you would want to actually take on stage to premiere a experimental electronic piece. Um, we've worked. I started out building systems for trumpet, and you saw the demo, and so that does work if you have a close mic on the trumpet or a mouthpiece transducer. Yeah, you can get that to work, but for any real concert piece, well, except for I guess a trumpet concerto, the trumpet's not going to play that much, and you end up so who do you follow, and what better to follow than a keyboard? But for voice, that's a very different problem, and these techniques do not work for voice because of the things you said. There's a lot of wide vibrato, the melisma, just even onset
Hmm.
detection is very difficult. And I think the best system for doing that was by another student of mine, Lauren Grubb, who developed really the first kind of statistic and machine learning based score following system. Um, and on my website, I have a demo from that. It worked. I, I I would say it wasn't perfect, but it worked quite well, and so it's possible. Again, like also with voice, there's kind of the miking, the microphone problem, and with anything
Yeah.
acoustic, you have the risk of picking up sound from the accompaniment, or the rest of the orchestra or whatever that also adds to the problems.
Yeah. Because in real performances, you'd have sounds coming from everywhere. So I'm guessing maybe it could be used somewhat to a good extent in like studios, but if it's in real performances, it will be much more difficult.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Now, along those lines, Chris Raphael has a piece system he developed, that's mainly been for string. Well, he's an oboe player, but he has a system with a lot of string violin concertos and pieces. And what he does is, um, he he knows, if all of the sound outside of the violin is created by the computer, sort of what the spectrum is coming out of the speakers, and you can actually sort of mask all of the strong harmonics in the accompaniment from the microphone input, and deal with all of that to improve the performance. So that's a possibility.
Hmm.
And his systems actually work for good players and consistent performances. His systems work very well, I think, and with microphone input from a violin, which I don't think Accomplice. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do anything too simple like just hook up a pitch estimation between a microphone and Accomplice. And I mean, in other words, if you tried to just take the violin input, convert it to MIDI, and run it into Accomplice, I don't think it would work particularly well. Um,
Hmm.
just because there's too much error in that transcription process if you're trying to do it with low latency in real time.
Yeah, because I was thinking maybe like in the future, if we have like more robust AI that has some sort of like end-to-end ways of like running and then kind of um accompanies a human player much more like a human does, maybe that would allow better accompaniment in these scenarios.
Well, the system that Lauren Grubb did for voices and the system that Chris Raphael did that works with strings, both have the property that they are based on statistical methods, and rather than looking at note onsets like you would with a keyboard, they're looking frame by frame at kind of the evolution of the spectrum, so that you don't
Oh, wow.
necessarily have to know where the note onsets are because you're considering the acoustic input as this continuous signal, and so that seems to be necessary if you don't have discrete, clean note onset information like you do with MIDI. And but once you do that, you can build some pretty reliable systems.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're done. We've gone way over time, but it was really cool. Anyway, Roger, thanks so much again for doing this.
Sure.
And certainly look forward to the next thing on your list.
Okay, well, I'm really hoping we can do a Felicità performance in Pittsburgh. A lot of work for that.
That would be cool. All right.
All right, thanks everyone.
Gonna stop
Thanks, Roger.
recording. Thanks again, Roger and Patrick. It's nice to see you.